Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to NIPS Home School. Hope you all are fine by the grace of Almighty Allah. I am also fine. This is Kamrun, Assistant Teacher of English, National Ideal English Version School, Day Shift. My dear students of class 4, today I am going to take your English language class. And now today's topic is verb. And we all know that verbs are action words, right? So let's start our class today. And we know that verbs are action words, and a verb is a word or a group of words, right? Verb is a word or group of words that shows what someone or something does, and it can also tell us about the or indicates an action or event or a state. Okay, look at this example, right? He reads a book. Now look at this word reads. This word tells us about the action, right? And I want to give another example. Now look, he is happy. So it tells us about the state of that person. Now look, he is happy. Again, now look at this example again. The accident. The accident happened. The accident happened near the school. The accident happened near the school. So happened is a verb here, and it tells us about the event or incident. So the verbs are the words which tell us about some action or the state or an event. Okay, so verb can be a single word or it can be a group of words also. Now we will know the types of verbs. And do you know how many types of verbs are there? Yes, I know, all of you know it. There are two types of verbs. And how many types of verbs are there? There are mainly two types of verbs. And do you know their name? Yes, the principal verb and auxiliary verb, right? Principal and auxiliary. There are two types of verbs, mainly there are two types of verbs, principal and auxiliary. And now you can ask, what are the principal verbs? The verbs which has a meaning of its own and can be used as the only verb in a sentence alone or with a helping verb. Now look at this example, the girl sings a song. Sings is the verb and it has its own meaning, and it can sit alone in a sentence. So this one is principal verb, and it can also used after a helping verb, with the helping verb. He is sleeping. Now look, is the helping verb or auxiliary verb, and sleep is the main verb, that means sleeping. Now look, this verb has its own meaning and it sits with auxiliary verb, that means it takes the help of this auxiliary verb. So here sleep, the verb sleep is the principal verb. Now we can say that the verb which has a meaning of its own and can be used as the only verb in a sentence or in or with a helping verb is called principal verb, right? Now we will go to auxiliary verb. And what is an auxiliary verb? That means the verb which is used with a main verb to form tenses or moods and helps the principal verb. It's called auxiliary verb. Look, now I am going to give you an example. I am reading a book. I am reading a book. Now look at this verb am. This verb doesn't have its own meaning, but it sits with the principal verb and it helps this principal verb. That's why it is called auxiliary verb, or it can also called helping verb. Okay, we can also call it helping verb because it helps the principal verb to make tense or to change its modes. She will go to the school. So will is the auxiliary verb and go is our what? We all know it is principal verb. So here will, this verb doesn't have its own meaning, but it helps this principal verb. That's why it is called auxiliary verb. And do you know there are two types of auxiliary verbs? There are two types of auxiliary verbs, and what are they? The one is primary and another one is modals. Primary and modals. And primary auxiliaries are like to be verb. This one is am, is, are, was, were. And to have verb like have, has, had. And there is do verb like do, does, and did. So those are called primary auxiliaries, and there are also modal auxiliaries. And what are they? There are many modal auxiliaries like shall, should, will, would, can, could, may, might, ought to, need, dare, etc. Okay, so those are called modal. And after a modal auxiliary verb, you will always write the present form of the principal verb. That means base form of the principal verb. So what do you learn today? Now look, verbs are the action words, and the verb, a verb tells us about the action, or sometimes it tells us about the event, or sometimes it tells us about the state of someone or something. And there are two types of verbs, principal verb and auxiliary or helping verbs. And what are called principal verbs? That means the word which has its own meaning and can sit alone in a sentence, or sometimes it takes the helps of the helping verb or auxiliary verbs. Okay. And what are auxiliary verbs? That means auxiliary verbs doesn't have its own meaning, but it can help the principal verb, and then it can form tense, or it can change the mood of the principal verb. Okay, and that's why it helps the principal verb, and that's why it is called helping verb also. So this one is auxiliary verbs, and there are two types of auxiliary verbs. And what are they? Primary auxiliaries and modals. And what are the primary auxiliaries? To be verb, there are three types of primary auxiliaries. To be verb, am, is, are, was, were. And to have verb, have, has, had. And do verb, do, does, and did. And there are modals auxiliaries, and what are they? Shall, should, will, would, can, could, may, might, ought to, need, dare, etc. Used to. Okay. Now we will go to exercise. We will do some exercise today. Now look at this example. Identify verbs in the following sentences and write whether they are principal or auxiliary verbs. Okay. Identify verbs in the following sentences and write whether they are principal or auxiliary verbs. So now look at the first sentence. Number 1, I will go to school. I will go to school. So here you will find two verbs, will and go. So will is the auxiliary verb and go is the principal verb. Now number 2, they attended the school. Number 2, they attended the school. So now look, there is only one verb, attended, and this one is principal verb because it has its own meaning. And now number 3, John laughed loudly. John laughed loudly, and there is only one verb, laughed, and it has its own meaning and it sits alone in a sentence. So laughed is the principal verb. Now number 4, the children are playing. The children are playing. And how many verbs are there? Yes, you are correct. There are two verbs, are and playing. So are is the auxiliary verb because this verb doesn't have its meaning, and play is the principal verb. Okay, because we know that it has its own meaning and it sits along with the helping verb. Okay, and it forms a tense. That means present continuous tense. Now number 5, I am drinking water. Number 5, I am drinking water. So now look, how many verbs are there? There are two types. There are two types, and am and drinking. So am is the auxiliary verb, that means to be verb, and here drink is the principal verb because it takes the help of the auxiliary verb, and drink, the word drink has its own meaning and it is an action word. Now number 6, the baby is sleeping. The baby is sleeping. Now look, there are two verbs. Again, is and sleeping. So is the auxiliary verb or helping verb, and sleep is the principal verb. Because sleep has its own meaning, and this verb is does not have its own meaning, but it helps the principal verb to make a complete sense. Now number 7, mother will cook food. Mother will cook food. Now look, there are also two verbs, will and cook. And which one is the auxiliary verb? Yes, you are correct. Will is the auxiliary verb because it doesn't have its own meaning in this sentence, but it helps the principal verb cook, and that's why it is called auxiliary verb or helping verb. Now cook is the principal verb because this word has its own meaning and it sits with the helping verb or auxiliary verb. Now number 8, our guests have arrived. Our guests have arrived. Now look, there are also two verbs, have and arrived, and have is the auxiliary verb because it helps the principal verb, and arrived is the principal verb because it has its own meaning. Now number 9, I take a bath every day. I take a bath every day, and there is only one verb, take, and this one is principal verb. Now number 10, we went to school. We went to school, and how many verbs are there? Yes, there is only one verb, went. So went is the principal verb, and we all know that went is the past form of the verb go, right? So there is only one verb, went, and this one is the principal verb. So we have done it in our live class also, and now you can take the screenshot. All of you will practice those sentences at your home, and we will do some exercises again in our live classes. So dear students, all of you will go through your book, and all of you will try to understand our today's topic, and all of you will do the exercises. That means you will practice those sentences at your home. So I hope all of you have understood our today's topic. So dear students, you will go through your book, and if you have any queries or if you have any problems, you can ask your subject teacher in your live class. So dear students, that's all for today. See you again. Allah Hafiz.